1928. What Lawrence does, really, is employ geography as a metaphor for the psyche. When his characters go south, they are really digging deep into their subconscious, delving into that region of darkest fears and desires. Maybe it takes a kid from a mining town in Nottinghamshire, which Lawrence was, to recognize the allure of the sunny south. Of course, this is not exclusive to Lawrence. Thomas Mann, a German, sends his elderly writer to Venice to die, in Death, Venice, 1912, but not before discovering a nasty streak of pederasty, and narcissism what does pederasty mean? And narcissism in himself. Joseph Conrad, England's greatest Polish writer, sends his characters into the hearts of darkness, as he calls one tale of a trip into Africa to discover the darkness of their own hearts. In Lord Jim, 1900, the main character has his romantic dream shattered during his first experience in the Indian Ocean, and is symbolically buried in Southeast Asia until he rises, redeemed through love and belief in himself, only to be killed. In Heart of Darkness, 1899, the narrator, Marlowe, travels up to Congo River and observes the near-total disintegration of the European psyche in Kurtz, who has been in country so long that he's become unrecognizable. Okay, so here's the general rule. Whether it's Italy or Greece or Africa or Malaysia or Vietnam, when writers send characters south, it's so they can run amok. The effects can be tragic or comic, but they generally follow the same pattern. We might add, if we're being generous, that they run amok because they're having direct, raw encounters with the subconscious. Conrad's visionaries, Lawrence's searchers, Hemingway's hunters, Kerouac's hipsters, Paul Bolas's down and outers and seekers, Forster's tourists, Durrell's libertines, all head south in more senses than one. But they do fall under the influence of warmer climes, or do those welcoming latitudes express something that's already been trying to make its way out? The answer to that question is variable as the writer and the reader. Now, most of this has to do with fairly specific places, but types of places also come into play. Theodore Roethke has a wonderful poem in praise of prairie, 1941, about, well, prairies. Do you know how few poems there are of any quality about prairies? No, his isn't quite the only one. It's not a landscape that's inevitably viewed as poetic, yet somehow Roethke, the greatest poet ever to come from Saginaw, Michigan, finds beauty in that perfectly horizontal surface, where horizons run from the eye and drainage ditch is a chasm. Beyond this one poem, though, the experience of being a flatlander informs his work in obvious ways, as his poems about this uniquely American or Canadian open flat agricultural space in the sequence of The Far Field, 1964, for instance, but in less subtle ways as well. His voice has a naive sincerity to it, a quiet, even tone, and his vision is of a vast nature. Flat ground is as important to Roethke's psyche, and therefore his poetry, as the steep terrain of the English Lake District famously was to William Wordsworth. As writers, we need to consider Roethke's Midwesterness as a major element in the making and shaping of his poems. Seamus Heaney, who in Boglin 1969 actually offers a rejoinder to Roethke in which he acknowledges that Northern Ireland has to get by without prairies, probably couldn't be a poet at all without a landscape filled with bogs and turf. His imagination runs through history, digging its way down into the past to unlock clues to political and historical difficulties, in much the same way that turf cutters carve their way downward through progressively older layers of peat, where they sometimes come upon messages from the past. Skeletons of extinct giant Irish elk, rounds of cheese or butter, Neolithic quernstones, 2,000-year-old bodies. He makes use of these finds, of course, but he also finds his own truths by digging through the past. If we read Heaney's poetry without understanding the geography of his imagination, we risk misunderstanding what he's all about. For the last couple of centuries since Wordsworth and the Romantic poets, the sublime landscape, the dramatic and breathtaking vista, has been idealized, sometimes to the point of cliché. Needless to say, vast and sudden mountains, the geographic features we find most spectacular and dramatic, figure prominently in such views. When, in the middle of the 20th century, W.H. Auden writes, in Praise of Limestone, 1951, he is directly attacking poetic assumptions of the sublime. But he's also writing about places we can call home. The flat or gently rolling ground of limestone country, with its fertile fields and abundant groundwater, with its occasional subterranean caves, and most important, with its non-sublime, but also non-threatening vistas. We can live there, he says. The Matterhorn and Mont Blanc, those emblems of the romantic sublime, may not be for human habitation, but limestone country is. In this case, geography becomes not only a way by which the poet expresses his psyche, but also a conveyor of theme. Auden argues for a humanity-friendly poetry, challenging certain inhuman ideas that have dominated poetic thinking for a goodly period before he came along. It doesn't matter which prairie, which bog, which mountain range, which chalk or limestone field we envision. The poets are being fairly generic in these instances. Hills and valleys have a logic of their own. Why did Jack and Jill go up the hill? Sure, a pail of water. Probably orders from a parent. But wasn't the real reason so Jack could break his crown and Jill could tumble after? That's what it usually is in literature. Who's up and who's down? Just what do up and down mean? First think about what there is down or up high. Low, swamps, crowds, fog, darkness, fields, heat, unpleasantness, people, life, death. High, snow, ice, purity, thin air, clear views, isolation, life, death. Some of these, you will notice, appear on both lists, and you can make either environment work for you if you're a real writer. Like Hemingway. In The Snows of Kilimanjaro, 1936, he contrasts the leopard dead and preserved in... What? He contrasts the leopard, dead and preserved in the snow on the peak, with the writer dying of gangrene down on the plain. The leopard's death is clean, cold, pure, while the writer's death is ugly, unpleasant, horrible. The final result may be the same, but one is so much less wholesome than the other. H. Lawrence offers the contrasting view in Women in Love. The four main characters, tired of the muck and confusion of life in near sea level England, opt for a holiday in Tyrol. At first, the Alpine environment seems clean and uncluttered, but as time goes on, they, and we, begin to realize that it's also inhuman. The two with the most humanity, Birkin and Ursula, decide to head back downhill to the more hospitable climes where Gerald and Gundry stay. Their mutual hostility grows to the point where Gerald attempts to murder Gundry and, deciding the act isn't worth the effort, skis off higher, only yards from the very top of the mountains. He collapses and dies of, for want of a better term, a broken soul. So, high or low, near or far, north or south, east or west, the places of poems and fiction really matter. It isn't just setting, that hoary old English class topic. It's place and space and shape that bring us to ideas in psychology and history and dynamism. It's enough to make you read a map. Oh, okay, bro. How long was that? 23 minutes, and not that bad, honestly.